Okay, so we're diving into
Yeah?
a topic that I think a lot of people are really interested in, but it can be kind of scary to talk about.
Huh.
We're talking about the potential for harm in spiritual groups.
Right.
And you've shared a bunch of articles and excerpts with us that
Yes.
really get into how to identify these groups, often called cults. And we're going to unpack the warning signs, and we're even going to get into a specific case study,
Right.
the Iwaparti Czaitania mission.
Yeah. It's a topic that's often surrounded by,
Yeah.
secrecy and misinformation.
Yeah.
So I think what we want to try and do is use these sources to shed light on, the tactics that these types of groups employ.
Right.
And really importantly, equip people with a sense of discernment.
Yeah, because it's not just like these abstract concepts.
Right.
The sources that you've shared highlight some really disturbing things, especially regarding this Iwaparti. We're talking about like allegations of financial manipulation, psychological pressure tactics, NLP, things like that. And one source even compares the IWT to a mafia, which is pretty intense.
Well, and that's what I think is particularly interesting.
Yeah.
Is how these allegations connect back to those broader patterns of cultic behavior.
Yes.
And really, what we want to try and do is use these broader patterns as a framework to help understand, the potential dangers involved here, and really equip individuals to make informed choices about their journeys.
Exactly. So are we going to use those broader patterns to look specifically at IWT? Is like having a lens to examine this group, right?
Precisely.
Okay.
So for example, one hallmark of a harmful group is that inability to leave honorably.
Right.
So rather than, just simply empowering individuals, these groups often resort to things like shunning or threats or even smear campaign when someone tries to exit. And your sources allege that IWT engages in similar practices to make leaving the group as painful as possible.
It's almost like a toxic relationship where they're holding someone emotionally hostage.
Right.
And speaking of control, another red flag that your sources are highlighting is the authoritarian power structure.
Absolutely.
Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So in these structures, everything operates from the top down.
Right.
There's limited member input.
Oh, wow.
Any dissent is suppressed.
Right.
So think of it like a pyramid.
Right.
The leader's at the apex.
Yeah.
And there's very little room for questioning or alternative viewpoints.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the leader himself. Your sources paint a rather concerning picture of Chris Butler, particularly regarding
there's claims of
his use of
exploitation. So the sources detail claims of financial pressure, demands for service that really prioritize the leader's needs over the members, and even using spiritual advancement as a tool to extract further resources.
Oh, wow.
So it really does raise questions about the group's true motivations.
One of the sources actually uses the term demonic leader when describing the potential for a spiritual authority to be misused for personal gain.
Yeah.
That's unsettling to hear, but is that concept found in traditional teachings?
Right.
There's that word parampara, which I've heard describes authentic spiritual lineage.
Well, you're absolutely right to bring up parampara.
Okay.
It essentially refers to that chain of spiritual masters and teachings passed down through generations.
Right.
And it really ensures the authenticity and safeguards the integrity of a spiritual path.
Okay.
Now, the concept of a demonic leader, it's less about a literal demon.
Right.
It's more about identifying those who deviate from those traditional teachings and who use their position for selfish or even harmful purposes.
So is it about making sure that their actions and teachings align with established scriptures?
Exactly. Yeah. And the sources suggest that, in the case of IWT, there might be a disconnect between their claims of following the traditional teachings and their actual practices.
Give me an example of that.
Well, they point to things like introducing new techniques that haven't been verified.
Oh, okay.
They have a technique called pranayama garanga.
Right.
And also, there's a blending of philosophies that may deviate from those core tenets.
So how do we know if that's a genuine development or just a tactic to solidify control?
That's the question, right?
Yeah.
And to further tighten that control, the sources claim that IWT employs isolation.
Oh, wow.
And information control.
Right.
So they describe how contact with outsiders is discouraged.
Right.
Alternative viewpoints are suppressed.
Yeah.
And they present a very carefully curated narrative
to
members, limiting their exposure.
Yeah, this information control thing is really scary to me because it reminds me of dystopian novels where they, the truth is really carefully manipulated. Yeah. How do they allegedly achieve this?
Well, one of the most striking claims is the use of fear, particularly through end-of-the-world scenarios.
Oh, wow.
So by creating this climate of urgency and fear, the sources suggest that Iwati fosters a sense of dependency.
Right.
So members feel like they need the group for protection or salvation.
So it creates that us versus them mentality, which can be really powerful.
Very much so.
In binding people together.
Yeah. And that really brings us back to the specific allegations against Iwati, especially regarding their leadership and manipulation tactics.
Okay.
We got a lot to unpack there. We'll dive deeper into that in the next part of our deep dive. You know, one of the sources uses this phrase that I think really captures the essence of what we're talking about, the wolf in sheep's clothing.
Right.
And it speaks to how these groups can present a seemingly benign exterior while concealing a much darker reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that really ties into what the sources are claiming about the Iwati's leadership structure.
Right.
They describe this system where members are expected to be completely subservient to Chris Butler and his appointed representatives.
Yeah.
And one source even calls it a mafia.
Right. That comparison to a mafia really highlights that emphasis on control and obedience.
Right.
That's allegedly within the IWT.
Right. So you're not allowed to question.
Right. Questioning Butler or his decisions is strongly discouraged.
Wow.
And it creates this climate of fear. And it really silences any dissent.
Yeah. And if these sources are accurate, it seems like this control goes beyond just like ideological conformity, right?
Right.
They get into some pretty serious allegations regarding Iwati's financial practices.
Yeah. The sources claim that members are expected to contribute a significant portion of their income.
Wow.
And that pressure is often applied to increase those contributions.
Wow.
There are even allegations of individuals being pushed into debt or facing financial ruin as a result of their involvement.
One source even uses the term spiritual blackmail, suggesting that access to higher teachings or initiation is often linked to the level of financial contributions.
It's a troubling dynamic for sure. And it raises those questions again about whether the group's focus is really on genuine spiritual growth or if it's more about amassing wealth and power.
And they also talk about a lack of transparency.
Yes.
The sources claim that Iwati owns numerous properties worldwide.
Right.
But the ownership is often concealed through these complex legal structures like trusts and shell corporations. It sounds like something out of a financial thriller.
It does. It really does.
Yeah.
And it raises concerns about whether these practices are designed to shield assets from scrutiny or potentially evade legal obligations.
Okay, so we have this picture of a group with an authoritarian structure, questionable financial practices, and a leader who demands absolute obedience. But how do they get people to buy into this? What are the manipulation tactics that they...
Well, the sources detail a range of tactics. And it's interesting how these tactics align with broader patterns of psychological manipulation that are often seen in these cultic groups.
Right.
One of the ones that comes up often is love bombing.
I've heard of that term, but I don't really know what it is.
Yeah. So the sources describe how new recruits are just showered with attention and affection.
Right.
And it creates this really intoxicating sense of belonging and acceptance.
So it's especially appealing to people who are maybe...
Yeah, especially for individuals...
lacking connection in their life.
Who are seeking connection. Or who are going through a vulnerable period in their lives.
And it makes it even harder to leave.
Right.
When things start to feel...
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, because they're creating that artificial sense of family.
Right.
So it makes it very difficult to break away.
And the sources claim that this love bombing is often coupled with more insidious psychological techniques.
Yeah. One of those is NLP.
Right. Neuro-linguistic programming.
That's right.
Right.
And NLP can be used for, personal development in a very healthy way.
Right.
But the sources on you
Yeah.
that IUOT employs these techniques
Right.
in a manipulative way.
And one technique they mentioned specifically is reframing.
Right, reframing.
Where negative experiences or doubts are reinterpreted in a way that supports the group's narrative.
Right. So by twisting the meaning of events, they essentially undermine critical thinking.
It's really scary.
It is.
It's like they're controlling your reality.
And then there's anchoring.
Right.
Which is another NLP technique.
Right. And that's all about linking certain emotions.
That's right.
To specific triggers, right?
Yeah. So in the context of IUOT, the sources suggest that this technique might be used to create these powerful emotional associations with the group or the leader.
It's like programming.
Programming you.
Yeah.
It's really scary.
It is. And it underscores the importance of understanding these tactics, not just in the context of IWOT, but in any situation where someone might be trying to exert undue influence over.
So knowledge is our best defense.
Knowledge is our best defense.
Being aware of these tactics can help us resist them.
That's right.
But it's not just about these external tactics.
Right. It's also about cultivating that inner strength and resilience.
Right. And that's what we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
The sources offer some really great advice on that.
Yeah.
Particularly regarding trusting your intuition.
Right.
Which I think is really difficult.
Yeah. And especially within a group like IUAT. Because if you question the leader or express doubt, you could face negative consequences.
That's a really good point.
So how can someone in that kind of environment still listen to their intuition?
Well, one of the sources specifically addresses this.
Okay.
And they emphasize the importance of creating space for reflection outside of the group's influence.
Okay.
So even if you can't physically distance yourself, you can still carve out that time for introspection, whether it's journaling or connecting with trusted friends or family members.
So finding those moments to step back from the group.
Exactly.
Okay.
And also just paying attention to your body's signals.
Right, because our bodies are often wiser than our minds.
Yes, they are.
Right.
So if you're experiencing anxiety, sleep disturbances, digestive issues, these can be signs that something's not right.
Yeah.
Even if you're trying to convince yourself otherwise.
Right. Speaking of warnings, your sources point to another key element of manipulation that's often used by groups like the IWOPT, and that's fear.
Yes.
We touched on this a little bit earlier with the end of the world scenarios.
Right.
But are there other ways that fear is used to control members?
Well, the sources describe how fear is woven into many aspects of the IWOT's teachings and practices.
Right.
For example, they allege that members are told that leaving the group will have dire karmic consequences.
Oh.
Or that they'll be cut off
from
spiritual progress.
Wow. So they're using your spiritual aspirations as leverage.
And the sources also claim that fear is used to enforce conformity and obedience.
So people are afraid to speak their minds, to challenge the status quo.
And that suppression of authentic expression and critical thinking can have devastating consequences for individuals.
It really seems like fear is at the heart of this.
It is at the heart of it.
You know, recognizing when our desire for belonging or spiritual growth is being exploited for someone else's gain.
Exactly.
It's a really important thing to be aware of.
And it highlights the importance of seeking out those spiritual paths that empower us, that encourage critical thinking, open dialogue, and that respect our autonomy.
And our individuality.
And our individuality.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And one of your sources makes this really interesting point about the potential impact that groups like the IWODT have on personal relationships.
Right.
Could you tell me about that?
Yeah. The sources allege that the IVOPT encourages members to distance themselves from family and friends who are not part of the group. And they claim it's a way to protect oneself from negative influences.
Okay.
But it can really lead to isolation, and broken relationships.
One source even describes families being torn apart, friendships, shattered individuals feeling deeply alone despite being surrounded by other members.
And it speaks to the insidious nature of these groups. They can infiltrate and erode the very bonds that give our lives meaning and support.
Vicious cycle.
It is a vicious cycle. The more isolated you become, the more dependent you feel on the group. And the harder it is to break free.
So if someone listening is concerned about someone they love, who they think might be involved in a group like the IWET, what advice do the sources offer?
Well, the sources emphasize the importance of patience, understanding, and avoiding confrontation. So directly challenging their beliefs or trying to force them out of the group can often backfire.
So it's kind of like if you try to pull a plant out of the ground by the leaves.
Exactly.
You have to loosen the roots first.
You got it.
You can't just yank it out.
That's a great analogy.
Right.
So the sources suggest focusing on maintaining a relationship with your loved one, expressing your concern and being a consistent source of support.
And we can also educate ourselves.
You can also
about this.
Educate yourself about cult manipulation tactics and share resources.
But ultimately,
it's their decision to leave.
The decision to leave has to come from the individual.
We can't control other people.
Right.
Right.
We can't.
And one of the sources actually really gets into the allegations of manipulation and control within the IWET. And they offer some pretty startling details.
They do.
About how these tactics impact people on a psychological and emotional level.
They describe former members experiencing anxiety, depression, even PTSD as a result of the trauma that they endured within the group.
It's really sad to think about the harm that these...
It's a sobering reminder of the potential harm that these groups can inflict.
They highlight how that constant pressure to conform, the fear of questioning,
or dissenting, that you could even be publicly shamed or ostracized, can really take a toll.
It can take a severe toll on mental and emotional well-being.
One source uses this really powerful term, soul-crushing, to describe the impact.
And it's a stark contrast to that image of peace and enlightenment that these groups often project.
So how do we tell the difference?
That's the question.
Between healthy spiritual guidance and
one of the key elements,
these harmful manipulation tactics
that the sources highlight is the presence of coercion or pressure.
So genuine spiritual teachings should empower people and encourage critical thinking and respect.
And respect personal autonomy.
Personal autonomy.
Whereas manipulative groups often use things like guilt, shame, fear, even the promise of spiritual advancement to control and coerce members.
And another red flag.
Another red flag is a rigid black and white worldview.
So manipulative groups.
So they're the only ones with the truth.
Often present their teachings as the only truth. And they demonize any alternative perspective.
It's that us versus them again.
Exactly. It's that us versus them.
So it's not just about educating ourselves. It's about creating a society that fosters connection and belonging and a sense of purpose.
It's about addressing those deeper societal needs that cults often exploit.
So we've talked about a lot in this deep dive.
We've covered a lot of ground.
The warning signs, manipulation tactics, impact on individuals and relationships, the financial aspects, the societal context.
It's been a lot.
It's been unpacked.
But I think it's been a valuable exploration.
I agree.
And hopefully it's equipped our listeners with some tools and insights that they can apply to their own lives.
And I think it's important to remember that even though we've focused on the negative aspects of cults, there is hope.
There is hope.
People
can and
do leave cults. They can heal. They can rebuild their lives.
They can rebuild their lives.
And they can find
genuine spiritual fulfillment.
Genuine spiritual fulfillment.
That's right.
And there are resources.
And there are resources available
to help them.
To help them along that journey.
Like therapists.
Therapists.
Support groups.
Support groups.
Online communities.
Online communities.
There's a whole network of people.
Who understand.
To understand what it's like.
What it's like.
To be caught in the grip of a cult.
To be in a cult.
And who are dedicated to helping others break free.
So if you're listening.
And
you're struggling with the effects. Reach out.
Please reach out.
There is help available. And there is hope.
There's hope.
For healing and for reclaiming your life.
And for anyone who's interested.
In
exploring spirituality.
And exploring spirituality.
I encourage you to do so.
With
awareness,
discernment.
And a healthy dose of skepticism.
Yeah.
Your spiritual journey is your own.
You
have the right to your path.
Absolutely.
To ask questions.
To explore different traditions.
And to find what works best for you. And to walk away from anything that doesn't feel right. That doesn't align with your values.
Or that compromises
your well-being.
Mm-hmm. One of your sources has this quote that I love.
Yeah.
The truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off.
I love that quote.
Right.
It speaks to the challenge to grow sometimes.
That often accompanies true growth.
Right.
And self-discovery.
So it's a good reminder that even though the journey's not always easy, it's ultimately worth it.
And that pursuit of truth and authenticity is a lifelong process.
Yeah.
We're always learning, always evolving, always refining our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. Your sources also talk about the importance of self-compassion and forgiveness.
That's so important because we're all human and we all make mistakes.
Yeah.
So if you've been involved in a cultic group or you're struggling with the aftermath of that experience, be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
It's okay to make mistakes.
It's okay to feel
hurt
and
confused. Yeah. And it's okay
take your time
to heal. Absolutely.
They also talk about
seeking supportive relationships,
whether that's with therapists, family members,
or even other former cult members. Those connections can be invaluable
because they give you a sense of
provide a sense of
validation,
understanding, encouragement as you navigate those challenges of recovery.
And it's a good reminder that you're not alone.
You are not alone.
Other people.
There are many people who have been through similar experiences.
And they've come out stronger.
And have come out on the other side.
And more resilient.
Stronger and more resilient than before.
Right.
Yeah.
The sources also give us some practical tips.
They do.
For how to protect ourselves. They suggest setting healthy boundaries.
Learning
to say no. And trusting our intuition.
Trusting your intuition.
All really good advice.
Those are all excellent.
And one thing that I thought was really interesting was that they said we should be aware of our own vulnerabilities.
Right.
So what are the things that make us susceptible to manipulation?
What are our unmet needs and desires?
Right. Once we understand that about ourselves, we can kind of create a defense.
We can take steps to address them.
Right.
And make ourselves less likely to fall prey to those groups.
Right.
Individuals.
And one source suggests actually making a list of your own red flags.
Your own red flags.
So what are the things that you notice
that tend to draw you in or make you more likely to overlook those warning signs?
Yeah, it's like creating a personal early warning system.
That's a great way to think about it.
And they also talk about how cults aren't just about like eccentric beliefs or charismatic leaders, right? They often tap into really fundamental human needs and desires.
They do. It's a fascinating insight.
Yeah.
And it speaks to why these grooves can be so alluring, even to intelligent and well-educated individuals. One source uses the analogy of a virus, describing how cults can infect not only individuals, but entire communities by exploiting our need for connection and belonging.
It's like they're hijacking.
It is. It's like they're hijacking
It's natural social instinct.
our natural social instincts.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to understand these dynamics, to recognize those patterns of manipulation that operate beneath the surface of those seemingly benign beliefs or practices.
One of the sources uses the term covert narcissism to describe the personality type, often found in cult leaders.
So they present a charming and charismatic facade, but beneath that surface lies a deep need for admiration and control.
And that need for control often manifests in the group structure and the rules.
Yes, it does.
So your sources talk about how the IVALUT allegedly operates with a very rigid hierarchy.
Rigid hierarchy.
Members have to follow a strict set of guidelines and submit to the authority of Chris Butler and his representatives. One source talks about former members who were actually punished
or ostracized.
For questioning Butler's decisions or expressing doubts.
So it creates a climate of fear and self-censorship where individuals are afraid.
It's like you can't even...
They're afraid to speak their mind.
Speak your mind.
Or to challenge the status quo.
Yeah.
And that suppression of dissent is a hallmark of totalitarian regimes.
Right.
Which one source actually directly compares.
Wow. That's a pretty bold comparison.
It is a bold comparison, but the parallels are striking.
Right, because...
both cults and totalitarian regimes.
Cults and totalitarian regimes.
Relies on control of information, the suppression of dissent.
Right.
And the creation of unquestioning obedience to the leader or the ideology.
So it's not just about, like, knowing the warning signs of cults.
Right.
It's about understanding...
It's about recognizing those patterns of control and manipulation wherever they appear.
Right. It could be in your...
It could be in a
religious group.
A political party.
Right.
Even a family.
And your sources also talk about understanding our own vulnerabilities.
Right. What aspects of our personality or life experiences might make us more susceptible to the allure of these manipulative groups.
Yeah, like, are we looking for...
Are we seeking a sense of belonging?
A sense of belonging?
Are we looking for a quick fix for our problem?
Or we just want someone to follow?
Are we looking for a charismatic leader to follow?
Yeah. By understanding those things about ourselves, we can be more careful.
We can be more discerning about the groups and individuals we choose to trust.
One source even suggests, like, writing down your own red flags.
Your own red flag.
Like, what are the things that I notice about myself?
Right. What are those things that tend to draw you in?
Right. Or that make me overlook.
Or make you more likely to overlook those warning signs.
Right.
It's like creating a personal...
like an early...
warning system.
Warning system.
And it's also important to understand the broader cultural context that can contribute to the rise of cults.
Right.
Your sources point to the increasing disillusionment with traditional institutions.
Yeah.
The search for meaning in a rapidly changing world.
Right.
And the allure of simple answers.
Right. Everyone wants a quick fix.
The complex problems.
Yeah.
So cults often thrive in times of uncertainty and upheaval.
Right.
Offering that sense of stability and belonging in a world that can feel chaotic and overwhelming.
Yeah. So we have...
And that's why it's so important to cultivate that sense of inner strength and resilience.
Right, so that we don't fall into those traps.
So that we don't fall prey to those easy answers or those seductive promises.
Yeah. The sources talk about things like...
They do.
Critical thinking skills.
Developing critical thinking skills.
A strong sense of self-worth.
Fostering a strong sense of self-worth.
Healthy relationships.
Nurturing healthy relationships.
Like finding a sense of purpose.
Finding a sense of purpose and meaning.
Right. That goes beyond...
That goes beyond any group or ideology.
Or ideology.
It's about creating a solid foundation within ourselves.
So we're not swayed.
So that we're less swayed by those external pressures or the allure of those charismatic leaders.
And recognizing that genuine spiritual growth doesn't always feel good.
It doesn't always feel good. It often involves a deep
messy
and honest confrontation with ourselves, with our flaws and our shadow side.
One source put it really beautifully. They said that the spiritual journey is not about seeking the light, but about learning to see in the dark.
I love that.
It's so true.
It's so true. And it's about developing that inner discernment.
Right.
That ability to navigate the shadows and to find the truth within ourselves.
We have to be.
And to do that,
curious.
We need to cultivate a sense of curiosity, a willingness to question, and a commitment to staying true to our own values and aspirations.
And let's not forget to have compassion.
Yes. And compassion.
Right.
Not just for ourselves.
Not just for ourselves.
But for those who have been caught in the grip of these manipulative groups, leaving a cult can be traumatic.
It can be so traumatic.
And individuals often need time, support, and understanding, heal, and to rebuild their lives.
The sources emphasize empathy and patience.
Yes. Recognizing that recovery is a process.
It's a process.
And there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
So we really have to listen.
We have to listen to individuals' experiences without judgment, offer support without pressure, and really just celebrate their courage in speaking out and seeking help.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think we've really covered...
We've covered a lot of ground.
A lot of ground in this deep dive.
In this deep dive into the world of cults.
Into the world of cults.
From those specific allegations against the Wiedzy Czaitania mission to the broader patterns of manipulation and control.
Yeah. It's a complex
and often disturbing
subject.
But I really believe...
That I believe knowledge is our best defense.
Knowledge is our best defense.
Right.
By understanding the tactics. Recognizing those red flags and cultivating our own inner strength and discernment.
We can protect ourselves.
We can empower ourselves and our communities to resist the allure of these manipulative groups and individuals.
And we can create a world.
And we can create a world
where
genuine spiritual seeking is honored.
Where critical thinking is valued.
Where critical thinking is valued.
And where people are free to choose their own paths.
And where individuals are free to choose their own paths without fear.
Without fear of exploitation or harm.
Of exploitation or harm.
If you're listening.
And for anyone who might be listening, who's struggling.
And you're struggling with the effects.
With the effects of cult involvement or who's questioning their own path.
Yeah.
Remember, you're not alone.
You're not alone.
There is help available.
There is help available.
There is hope for healing.
There's hope.
And you have the strength within you.
And you have the strength.
To reclaim your life.
To reclaim your life.
And to find your own way.
Keep seeking. Keep questioning.
Keep seeking.
And keep that BS detector on high alert.
Keep questioning.
Your journey is yours to own.
And keep that BS detector on high alert.
So navigate it with courage.
Your journey is yours to own.
And wisdom.
So navigate it with courage.
And an unwavering commitment to your own well-being.
And an unwavering commitment to your own well-being.